So, constructive drawing theory is our ability to see complicated shapes, such as the end results that we look with awe and admire, and break them down to significantly simpler shapes. If you look at this, it looks like, oh my god, how could I draw that? The wrinkles, the details, so much. And if someone is not very experienced in the constructive drawing theory, they might attempt to do something like start with the center, get the details, and basically expand like a moss growth. Like start with drop a pin, start here, replicate what they see, and keep going. That, without a plan, can leave you quite quickly with the wrong object proportion. So instead of a circular candy, you might end up with something looking like a rectangle or a little too pressed, a little too long. It might just look off, even if all the details seem like they're in the right place. To prevent that, we lay roadmaps, we lay instructional guidelines, and those are laid through constructive drawing theory. We look for the biggest object, then the second biggest objects get laid down, then a roadmap for the details, the outline is laid down. This can be significantly more steps the more complicated the object is. This is a significantly easier object, so this is what we use for the first example, but things can get very complicated. To be able to break down more complicated shapes, we usually start with simpler shapes first. So this is broken down in ellipses and put into perspective. This is broken down in boxes, basically creating a box, then cutting away the gap in between, then adding the details. Stuff like these are broken down in circles and added the details of. But the more complicated an object gets, the more geometry you will need to break it down, the more ratio taking you will need to break it down. Before we start this, I would recommend everyone to check out how to take ratios. I'm going to send in links towards that to the chat really quickly. These two are the videos on how to take ratios from 3D to 2D. We're going to be working 2D to 2D today. If you're actually interested in learning constructive drawing theory and you're going to be working on this in the future, note these two videos down. Do watch them. So, shall we start with something simple? Something simple would be square-like, triangle-like, or orbital. So a simple thing would be directly geometric practices, which is what most of the constructive drawing theory starts with. Objects are in specific shapes. Triangles go to pyramids and prismas. Circles go into orbs and cylinders. And rectangles go into cubes and rectangular boxes. With these objects, you can break down almost anything in the world, and that ability to replicate these objects and see them in different things will also develop your ability to break down organic shapes with significantly more complicated objects. But first you need to be able to take the ratios of an object that does not have angles. This is without angles. A box is 90 degrees, a cylinder doesn't have angles, so on. This is with angles. Objects with angle reliance will become the necessity of organic sketches. So let's start with the simplest examples possible. A candy. A circular candy. So when we take ratios with something like this, we take ratios with a stick. You can also use a pencil if you feel comfortable. With an object this small, I find pencils to be a little too thick. So I would recommend using a stick. When you're taking ratios, 1:1 ratio would be if the stick is right against the object, and you will note it down and transfer it to paper like this. 1:1 ratio, almost like a ruler. But you don't normally transfer things 1:1. In real life, you usually look at them from a distance and you cannot put the stick up to them, and you usually draw things smaller than they are or bigger than they are. So to take that kind of ratio, you hover over it instead of 1:1, where the ratio would be this for the circle. You hover over it, the ratio shrinks. And you put your finger to the end of it. And you want to transfer this to the paper, you can change the size of your painting by moving the stick closer to your face or further away from your face. You can shrink the object by taking the ratio from further away and keeping your finger closer to the paper, or by taking the ratio from close by and keeping your finger away from your paper. You can shrink and size up your objects by ratio taking. When you do it in person, you simply hold it against the object, take a ratio, transfer it down. it is recommended that you always stand on the same spot and take